Guaranteed to be timelier than the latest offerings from CD Projekt Red. Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
Welcome to episode 275 of Motorsport 101, and I think Cam is still recovering from that intro sequence. Cam, you still with me? Speak to me, man.
Well, I'm just doing great right now.
You should be doing great, because you're 3 shots of alcohol into this recording session.
Yeah, I don't have the bathrobe, unfortunately, anymore.
If you have a problem with drinking, we encourage you to seek help, of course. But I can't get over how in his element Cam is right now.
I'm just disappointed that I didn't have a victory cigar.
You were almost at Shannon Sharp. You were 75% of the way there. It was a valuable effort, I have to say.
I don't know. I'm missing the Super Bowls too, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't help. RJ, how are you?
I'm just like the Cowboys. I'll take you anywhere in the world you want to go, except the Super Bowl.
As a fan of a certain team based in Western New York that almost moved north of the border of Toronto, I can relate to that. Can we get Algarve back? Can we get Portimao back on the calendar full time soon, please? I really like that place.
Decent. It was a fun little track.
It was
all right. King, how's the optimism for Portugal?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It was pretty good. Portugal's number 1 club team, Wolverhampton Wolves. They are pretty good, just like this race.
Oh dear. I love that King's intro was basically like Adam from episodes of Worth It on BuzzFeed there. It's just a man of few words, but all of them quality. In this episode, as we are already like either tired and or drunk, we're going to get through episode 275, talking about, well, the return of Formula 1 to Portugal, the Grand Prix at Portimao. We'll break down some of the nuance of it, and sadly a weekend that was dictated by, unfortunately, one ugly incident in practice. We'll get into that.
Yeah, it wasn't really dictated by that, unless you were, like, on the internet.
Unfortunately, King, we are.
We're terminally online people.
You know how this story goes. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Lewis Hamilton making some history. Some wildness in silly season as we got another big piece of the domino falling as Haas announced they were clearing the decks of their current drivers. A little bit of talk about the F1's future calendar and a salary cap for the drivers. Just when you thought the cost cap situation couldn't get any more interesting. More on that in the next 45 minutes or so. But in the meantime, basically, you can find us real quick, and I'll try and get through this one relatively quickly, because if you've got the audio version, you've probably already heard this once already. But places you can find us. Hi, if you're watching us on YouTube, if again, on the screen is all our Twitter accounts. If not, at Harrison101, at RJ O'Connell, at Ryan Eric King, and at CBuckley917. If you want to find our Twitter handles there, the podcast's Twitter is at Motorsport101. So Motorsport_101, I should say. You can also catch us on Instagram at Motorsport101pod. You can follow us on there for updates on new episodes and whatnot, and some bonus content every once in a while. Our website, motorsport101.com, that talks in depthly about one of these issues we'll get to very, very briefly. And we can back us financially on Patreon if you really like us. Patreon.com/Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access for all of the audio versions of the show. Upgrade to the $10 tier for the video episodes, as well as the supporters club of our Discord server, where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. So while Cam wrestles his dogs outside, we'll be back after this to talk about Formula 1's Portuguese Grand Prix.
September 8th, 1995, as Baltimore Orioles shortstop Cal Ripken Jr. broke Lou Gehrig's record of 2,130 consecutive Major League Baseball games played. It was ESPN broadcaster Chris Berman who remarked at the time, "Let it be said that number 8, Cal Ripken Jr., has reached the unreachable star. And it was a similar feeling on the afternoon of October 25th, 2020, when Lewis Hamilton won the Portuguese Grand Prix at the Algarve International Circuit in Portimao, taking the 92nd win of his career and surpassing Michael Schumacher's record of 91 victories, which many all thought would never be surpassed. And now we're left to wonder, how many more will Hamilton go on to achieve? How many more races can he win before his career is over? Well, it wasn't quite as straightforward as the 25-second gap to teammate Valtteri Bottas in second would suggest, even as Hamilton dominated the latter three-quarters of the race. We had a chaotic start on a cold, damp track that left pole sitter Hamilton stunned as Carlos Sainz's McLaren Renault surged to the lead from 7th on the grid, and even Alfa Romeo's Kimi Räikkönen drove up 10 places from 16th to 6th. The rest of the race wasn't as chaotic, but it was still a moment of levity for those needing a temporary reprieve from the inevitable dominance of Mercedes-AMG Formula One team. Behind the two Mercedes, Max Verstappen finished third for Red Bull, having somehow escaped culpability for ableist comments directed towards Racing Point's Lance Stroll after an incident in free practice 2. Stroll then came to blows with Lando Norris in the race, who has somehow received a little bit more heat for some critical comments about Stroll's driving that weren't couched in mean-spirited rage, plus dime a dozen comments about Hamilton's success of a top-tier ride, which in reality were much like Roberto Guerrero in the 1992 Indianapolis 500 in that they were a non-starter. And this is before we get to career midfielder Vitaly Petrov only standing down from his role as the guest driver steward, not for being called to task on recent idiotic homophobic comments made in response to Lewis Hamilton's activism, but after the assassination of his father in Russia. Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel finished in the points for Ferrari. Pierre Gasly celebrated 5th place with a new contract extension with AlphaTauri. Sergio Perez won Driver of the Day for Racing Point with his future up in the air. And we're now on what seems to be the 29th chapter of the weekly debate. Is Alexander Albon damaged goods after a torrid race left him down in 12th? Overall, I'm feeling a decent to strong sits on this race.
Yeah.
I will give it a quality. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6.
Yeah. It's a mild shade.
I wanted to give it more. I wanted to give it more. This track was incredibly fun to watch the cars go around, but as far as the racing product, kind of a nothing burger.
I mean, the racing was good, but then you get into like the problem at the front where it's like you can't really race when there's no one to race.
Yeah, the gaps between the cars were pretty expansive, and despite the insane first lap where we had Carlos Sainz swarming and passing both Mercs.
Go on, bootstrap Sainz! Go on and get him!
Anyways, I just started licking. Look, we know Carlos, for all of his problems off the track, is phenomenal on. But it didn't really last very long because once the medium tires came up to temperature, they ran him down and the soft tire runners dropped through the field like a bag of dirt.
Yeah, it made for a good photo op for McLaren, I'll say that.
Yeah, first and third at one point.
But Dre, I want to ask you, because the big story of the race, Lewis Hamilton broke Michael Schumacher's record. A lot of us thought that would never be touched. And I know we touched on it when he tied the record last time out. Dre, just briefly, your reaction to Lewis Hamilton becoming Formula One's winningest driver and potentially the first man to reach 100 sometime down the road.
I mean, 7 consecutive 10-win seasons will do that to you. It's incredible. I've joked about it many a time. I never thought this record would go down. I thought it was untouchable. I stand by this. And look, I was right for a very long time on this one. But it is crazy to see it. I mean, it's incredible to see it go down so quick. And, you could have imagined someone winning 92 Grand Prix in 263 starts. I mean, it was Josh Wilcock that pointed out on Twitter afterwards. He now has a better win percentage than Jim Clark. And Clark had like 2...
Unprecedented.
Clark was an unprecedented freak of a driver that had about 200 less Formula One starts. I mean, that's just... It's utterly ridiculous what we're seeing right now, and he makes it look so easy at times, and we take it for granted sometimes because, of course, yeah, like there was a little bit of validity in what Lando was saying off the track, in that, yeah, on paper maybe he only is facing one or two cars, but it's Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen, and that's the way the sport is. That's the way the sport's always been for the most part, and you know, it doesn't take anything away from the incredible consistency, dominance, and just all-round, like the most talented driver we may have ever seen in our lives.
At the end of the day, you know, if races were only run on paper, the same guy would win every week. The same team would win every week. Yeah. And while that is kind of the case in F1 right now, that's why you run the races.
Yeah.
Look at it like this. Going into 2006... would a single person on Earth have put money on Nicky Hayden defeating Valentino Rossi for that title?
No. Not a chance. No. Not a prayer.
And yet, so it was.
It's an unbelievable accomplishment. He's gonna go to three figures. It's up to him, really, how far he wants to take this and how much distance he wants to put himself. I know the big one is still in sight for him, and that's world title number 8, which would you bet against him to get that by the end of next year? I know I certainly wouldn't. No. And, you know, it's an incredible accomplishment. It's a box ticked. I'm glad that even the British press back here acknowledged it. Probably more than they did. It's weird, because Formula 1 acknowledged the tie-in of the record a lot more last week as opposed to this week, although whoever did the stop-motion video of his 92 wins, gold star to that person.
Gold star for putting in photos of Nico Rosberg's wins somewhere in there. Is that
Nico was a big part of Lewis's career. You know,
but whoever did that, great fair play to them. But I'm glad the British press back here, you know, Hamilton actually made the front page of the Guardian on Monday for his 92nd career win, which I thought, wow, that's something I never thought I would see. The Guardian sticking a black sportsman on the front of its paper. That does not happen very often, let me assure you.
You're here for the achievements and not for the activism, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm glad it's getting acknowledgement. I'm glad there's been talk of a knighthood. You know, it should be in the UK as far as I'm concerned. It's long overdue.
Him and Rashford for what Rashford's doing single-handedly to help impoverished children in the United Kingdom more than, you know, the United Kingdom's own government.
No kidding. And look, yeah, he was given an MBE on the Queen's birthday honours this last week for those who are maybe not in touch with British culture so much. But yes, we did find it quite funny. A lot of people joked on Twitter yesterday about how it's looking like Sports Personality of the Year in the UK, but the BBC is going to be a lock between two outspoken, humanitarian black men and the amount of danger that would be in the office trying to figure out who wins that award. So that'll be fun at the BBC. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm glad it's been acknowledged, and it is a phenomenal achievement, and it's only going to get pushed into the stratosphere even further by the time Hamilton's said and done, I reckon. So there'll be a lot more to come. We'll be talking about that in 3 digits very soon.
Yeah. If Lewis Hamilton can't get a knighthood with 7 world championships, and like Ben Ainsley can get a knighthood with like 4 Olympic gold medals in sailing, something's real wrong here.
And this is coming from the sailing expert of the podcast.
Noted Sail GP expert Ryan Eric King.
Noted America's Cup coverage and expert. You know, I will say...
When that hits the mainstream, we're going to be the first there. So we make the big time, baby.
I do gotta say, though, more Formula 1 car launches should be inaugurated by cracking a bottle of champagne over the engine cover.
Not sure the engineers would approve of that one, but but
oh my god! Now I'm just thinking of when Vettel and Webber stickered up a car as a promotion, and the stickers were just all over the place. Horner says, "I don't know if the Aero guys will be too happy about this."
Every 2.9 races he enters, Lewis Hamilton wins. That's astonishing.
2.9. 2.9! Yeah. It's just utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. It looks like we can dodge this bullet no longer. It was second on our list of bullet points. Now, on a serious level, consider this a content warning. The following is going to be a discussion on some unfortunately rather unsavoury ableist language and terms used. Please look after yourselves. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Please be careful out there and look after yourselves. Just consider this a warning. In fact, what I will do, once this video goes up, I will put a timestamp to skip if you do not feel comfortable listening to this segment. So bear that in mind. That'll be down in the description below, and I'll leave it in the audio description as well. So, if you, by all means, skip this one if you're not comfortable. Unfortunately, a lot of the weekend's talk was unfortunately dominated after Friday's running in free practice 2, and it was an incident between Max Verstappen and Lance Stroll. They both were fighting for the same piece of road into turn 1. Unfortunately, I think it was Stroll on the outside that turned into Max's path, and they both hit each other and took each other out at turn 1. Both were given a reprimand by the stewards afterwards for generally being very naughty boys. Unfortunately,
it's practice. We're talking about practice.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, there was a broadcasted radio message that made its way into the media centre, which was very quickly published, understandably. Now, again, I use these terms only in context because it's directly what Max had said, but he referred to Lance as a retard and a Mongol. And let me just say as a disclaimer, and I think everyone in this room would agree with me here, these are slurs. These should not be used under any context or circumstance. They are horrible words used to dismiss, judge, discriminate against people on the autistic spectrum, mental illnesses. The list is very, very long, unfortunately, and it's a word that hurts people. They're words that hurt people, and it really, really is unacceptable. There is no right context those terms should ever be used, as far as I'm concerned. And I not for a little bit too much self-indulgence, but I did write a piece about this on the website, on motorsport.com, if you want to read a little bit more. I went into it on a personal level about how those terms have affected me, because it is something that I've personally had to deal with on a personal level. For those guys who don't know me very well, I was born with a speech and language impediment, as well as not finding out I had ASD, or more commonly known as Asperger's syndrome, till I was 17 years old. It is a word that has been thrown at me on many occasions in places like my high school and, other places. Unfortunately, kids are mean. They will use those terms. It is not okay. It is never okay to use those terms in any way, shape, or form. And as we've always said on this show, we believe this is a show for everyone, and no matter how you identify or whatever you're going through, we should not be using those terms, and we are strongly against that in any way, shape, or form. And it was infuriating to see some of the backlash regarding that, and just for me, what was the most frustrating thing was that it was just completely glossed over by the time we got to Sunday. There was
it wasn't the backlash, because there was people were very angry at Max over these terms, but in equal percentage, and perhaps more people either brushed it off, as you said, glossed it over, or actively encouraged it because, well, he's wearing his heart on his sleeve. Fuck off.
Because Lando Norris proved on Sunday,
You can get angry about a million different ways, and you don't need to use language like that.
And, I think a lot of the reason why, there wasn't any impetus to respond as compared to what happened to Lando Norris is that what Lando did happened on a Sunday, and what Max did happened on a Friday. If you're watching or following Formula 1 on a Friday, you are in a very, very small minority of people.
Yeah,
I get that.
I'm not so sure about that.
I get that at the same time. It doesn't matter whether you say it on a Friday free practice in the first few minutes of the installation laps. or if it's in the middle of FP2 during a race simulation, or if it's on the last lap of the race itself. That's not an okay thing to say on the radio, knowing that that's going to be broadcasted for a number of publications to run ad nauseum and write articles about.
I disagree. I kind of disagree, King, because it was plastered everywhere. Every outlet covered this.
Yeah, Luke Smith was right. Luke Smith Autosport was on it within seconds.
This was not something that would be glossed over via timing,
especially given how many people are on Twitter these days.
Yeah, especially with the reach of social media, and I mean, when you compare it to Lando's comments later. And
I could see how people could read into what Lando said is that he's jealous that a black British man broke all these records in a good car.
I don't see that because Lando has been one of the most staunch supporters of BLM in the F1 paddock. Yeah, he's been very vocal about this.
Yeah,
the person who was in his mentions, and she was verified. I don't remember her name. Look. Every time there's someone not calling Lewis Hamilton a god, you're in their mentions calling them racist. There's nothing to gain by saying that.
It's not helpful. Look, let me just say on the record, because I was one of these people that was involved in that, it doesn't help. If anything, it adds more fuel to the fire of people that are dismissive of race issues within motorsport in the first place.
It undermines your own point.
Exactly. As much as there are many racial issues within motorsport that need to be discussed on the largest platform, this is not one of those occasions. Yeah. There was enough validity in Lando's comments, in my opinion, as well as his previous track record in handling delicate subject matters like mental health and the Black Lives Matter movement in general, that there was enough there for me to say with confidence that the criticisms of Hamilton was not based on race. And I'd be shocked if that was his intention. I really, really don't think that was his intention. Yeah. I would say that with strong confidence on that.
And plus the beef with him and Stroll, it's just like, it's whatever. These young kids are going to beef just like Ocon and Verstappen did a couple years back.
Look, if you get... we didn't actually talk about this, but Stroll basically did a mirror version of what he did to Verstappen. Ruined Lando's race, took himself out of the race.
I mean, bold move to try and set it up the outside.
Bold move,
I love me some Lance Stroll more than most, but not as much as
went
some
the wrong
Lance
side,
Stroll's
man.
But yeah, it was
he went the wrong side. Point is, though, Lando had his race ruined by someone. You're gonna be a little salty.
Yeah. But he handled it much better than Max.
There was no comments on the level of what Max said. And the fact that Max's comments were arguably celebrated by some people, there's no fucking place.
Yeah, like my response was directly pointed at, on the set list to the reaction to what Verstappen did. Like, generally...
There wasn't one.
Yeah, there wasn't one. Like, For the most part, like, I would expect the FIA to do what they did with Verstappen in the past for his past transgressions, where he has an issue, an apology, he gets fined, and he also has to serve community service. There's like, well, nothing happened.
Keep in mind, this is the same guy who, during the "we don't actually race as one" movement said, well, racism is a difficult subject.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Max Verstappen has very skewed socio-political views. And it's a shame, because I want to like a guy that's as entertaining to watch on the track just for his driving 80 to 90% of the time as Max Verstappen. The problem is you can tell that he is not a driver that was raised with love. Unfortunately, he has leaned into a lot of his father's bad behavior and taken it on as his own. And I don't know when he's going to come out of that, or if he is ever going to come out of that phase. And that's what's so upsetting. Because he should know better than this.
Yeah, it's like, it's fine to insult another driver in the heat of the moment. due to an accident, but it's never okay to use a slur. There are ways to insult people without using slurs.
Yeah.
Look, regarding Max's upbringing, because that's clearly a part of this. We know by now a lot of, how Jos Verstappen is as a person, as a father, etc.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, one way or another, we're all products of our environment. Whether we use that to, whether we become, a direct product of that and we come out unchanged.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're living in 2020. All the information in the world is available in your pocket.
Right.
Just from going around the world. You can step up and rise above being a product of your environment, especially when it comes to how you treat other people.
Yeah, and arguments like that, saying it's due to his upbringing, is fine when you're still a teenager, even up to you're
He's
19.
not anymore.
Yeah, he's 23 years old. He's an adult.
He's a grown man at 23. Yeah,
it's really weird thinking that Max Verstappen is 23.
Yeah,
already in the sport for 6 years, and he unfortunately still has a lot of work to come as a person and as a driver. And we don't want to talk about that because we've probably spent as much time talking about this as the all-time wins record coming down. We don't want to spend the show like this, but we're
Never.
obligated to.
Yeah,
This is kind of important.
we want to be covering positive subjects, but 2020 just keeps kicking our ass.
yeah.
Look.
I'll time out on this because I've not spoken very much about this. Because honestly, King wanted to make it more about the reaction, and unfortunately,
Well, I didn't write the set list.
Yeah, I understand that, but look, this revolves a lot around me because let's be honest, we all know I'm the most outspoken out of the four of us on here. Let's be frank. And I got wrapped up with a lot of idiots on Friday, and one of them being Jason Plato on Sunday when Autosport addressed the same comment and said, there's absolutely a case he brought the sport into disrepute on Friday regarding that, and it was Jason that described the whole story as basically, don't be offended, it's woke nonsense, and I actually had a conversation with him about it, and he actually admitted that a member of his own family deals with ASD, and I just found it completely disappointing that he had no empathy whatsoever towards a member of his own family that has to deal with this insulting term that is an incredibly horrible thing to say about people that suffer through either mental illness or autism in general. And I was horrified. I was in the middle of this discussion, and he made it all about him, where he basically said that, I just choose to not let it offend me. Well, thanks, Jason, but unfortunately, not all of us have that fucking luxury. Not everyone has that luxury, unfortunately. I have to deal with this. I deal with this every day, and I'm approaching my 30th year of life. And I had multiple people flip that same term and use it on me when I said don't use that term. Because people on the internet can be dicks. And unfortunately, when you call incidents like this woke nonsense, you're encouraging other people to think it's okay to use those terms when it's not. I wrote this on my blog. There is 171,000 active words in the Oxford Dictionary right now, roughly. About 45,000 of them are words that are no longer in common use. Most reasonable people are basically asking, don't use 12 of them. This is not hard, okay? This is not difficult. All most reasonable people are asking is just to tweak a few words out of your vocabulary on a reasonable level, and yet we still can't even manage that in the year of our Lord 2020.
It's not difficult. It should not be as difficult as it seems to be for some people to show basic fucking compassion towards other people.
Look, for the last time...
By the way, you're 3 of 3 at this point. Between Eddie Irvine, Mark Webber, and now Jason Plato. Of getting into Twitter beef.
Motorsport does not like me, clearly, because this keeps happening, unfortunately, and it's frustrating me that I have to keep calling people out for this sort of behaviour, because it's the only way it's ever going to change.
Absolutely.
It needs people to be told that it's not okay to use these terms. And you know what? I will take that same mental beating 1,000 times over if it stops one person from realising, hey, this is bad and it's not worth using this term, and it's a basic and human function to be able to just not use it and just look in the mirror and realise, hey, I'm using a term that hurts a large subset of humanity, and it's probably for the best I don't use that term. It's really not as hard as you think, people. Give it a try. You might just be surprised with the outcome. It's easier than you think to not be a piece of shit over this, honestly. And Max Verstappen is a walking disappointment, and it's a shame because I said it in the written piece. He is a galvanizing force in this sport. He attracts new fans, old fans. He ticks a box for everybody, and he is going to be the future. Yeah,
it's not a stretch to say that he is one of really three or four faces of the sport.
He is
faces of open wheel motorsport in general.
And if he used that power for good, if he used that influence for good, more often than not, then I think motorsport would be in a much better place than it is now. Yeah, but absolutely. The problem is we have to talk about stuff like this. And I know it's hard because growing up as a person on the autism spectrum disorder, and I was subject to a lot of that abuse, and, you know, it was easy for one of those words to flow off my tongue like it was hello, and that was a terrible thing that I had to unlearn over years. But eventually I did. And it just... it's
learn from your mistakes.
Man,
if you've said it in the past, you know what? Just stop saying it.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not hard, and there isn't an excuse anymore.
Right.
Should we talk about something that's a bit more interesting in Formula 1 that doesn't involve upsetting people? That'd be nice.
Because silly season has arrived.
And
there we go.
There we go.
That'll do it.
Haas is sweeping the decks. Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen not returning to Haas next year. So, fellas, who's in the frame to replace them, and who should they sign?
Well, if you believe the rumors, and similarly to IndyCar, half of the employed and unemployed F1 drivers in the world.
It could be Nico Hülkenberg, Sergio Perez, Mick Schumacher, Robert Schwartzman, Callum Ilott, Nikita Mazepin, or it could be who's in this mug?
So the leading rumor at the moment is that Haas will be signing Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher. But again, that's just the leading rumor.
We may need to back this up a bit because, if you recall, Mick Schumacher was the leading runner for the Alpha seat, but apparently something has changed to where the Sauber side of this Alfa Romeo project, we know they want to keep Kimi, and now they want to keep Giovinazzi as well.
Even though it could be another case where Ferrari have no control over who Haas signs, but they do have the choice of, one seat at Alpha. So by them letting Haas sign Mick Schumacher, open up the chance for them to get more of their junior drivers into F1.
Yeah, right. It's a win-win in that situation. And, man, after the announcement of his departure, which I expected Grosjean to leave.
Zero chill.
I had expected Grosjean to leave because he said at the start of the season, well, he wants to go somewhere where he can actually win.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Peugeot LMH project.
Mm-hmm.
Man, he just started shredding the Haas car on social media. Apparently, that car's aero balance is shifting as much as 4% from corner to corner, which is cataclysmic.
Dude, that's bad, and it makes me wonder, I know Romain Grosjean has a rep, Kevin Magnussen has a rep, but if
they're driving a shitbox.
Yeah, I'm thinking, unfortunately, I don't know if an all-rookie lineup is going to be what fits, is it?
They acknowledged it last year.
And, for the most part, it's not, it doesn't matter next year if they're both rookies. Haas is clearly focused on 2022.
Yeah. They have to be. Because, they
if
acknowledged it last year.
The
the car's a shitbox, but And they acknowledge, like, the drivers weren't the problem last year.
Right. And if you're going to clear the decks, now is the time, knowing there is a regulation change in just over a year's time, and you probably want to get your drivers in place now rather than as the wheel turns for 2022. So if they're going to blow it up, now's the time. And look, I know Nikita Mazepin is about as popular as a horse's arse right now on the land of F1 Twitter. You could do a lot worse than having him in that seat.
He ain't bad as a driver.
No. He's a solid Formula 2 level driver. He still has a good chance of a top 3 championship spot in Formula 2 this year. And at times, he has been very, very quick indeed. I think that'd be hard to argue with even the most hardcore of... Yeah, like he's one of the quickest dudes in the series, and even the most devout of Callum Ilott fans on the internet, mostly Twitter, would be hard-pressed to deny that the man is quick in certain trims on certain occasions. You could do a lot worse than a, well-funded, pretty quick driver right now in Mazepin. Mick Schumacher is probably the number one prospect on the board from a youth standpoint. If that was the lineup, I don't think there'd be too many people umming and ahhing on Twitter. Maybe. Because...
Look,
possibly.
Overall, that's a solid... If you're going to go with 2 rookies, 2 F2 prospects, ain't bad.
It's not bad. Yeah. It's not bad at all.
And, Mazepin was going to get to Formula 1 eventually, because, even what his father wanted to buy, Racing Point,
right,
ending up being...
Got bid sniped by Lawrence Stroll.
by another racing dad,
Yeah. My racing dad could beat up your racing dad with money.
Well, my racing dad has $billions. Oh, yeah, but my dad has $1 billion and he knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
They just have a showdown in the middle of a wrestling ring, hitting each other with gold bars.
Right. It's like last billionaire standing match. We'll have a standing 10 billion count.
This really is end stage capitalism.
By God, that's Carlos Slim cashing in his money in the bank briefcase on George Russell.
Oh Lord, yeah, we do have to talk about Williams.
Yeah,
Williams, or as we now call them, Doralton Racing, because things are changing.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk that, when Claire Williams was in charge, she was one of the first people to announce that Williams were not going to be changing their driver lineup in 2021. As you can now obviously imagine, things have changed in the few months since then. And management is looking at the situation, looking at free agency, and realising, hey, we might be able to coax Sergio Perez over. And it's made a lot of people on the internet very twitchy, one in particular being one George Russell, that his seat might be the expendable one. If they were going to bring in Checo, because again, let's be honest here, Williams are pretty crap. They need a lot of money, they need a lot of resources, and Nicholas Latifi has already got a lot of skin in that game for Williams as it is. It was never going to be him. And so his family, we all know about their background and their skin in the game for Formula 1 right now. So unfortunately, George is the odd man out here. And it would be Russell that would be sacrificed if Sergio Perez gets that seat, if they're able to talk him into it, basically.
It's been an ever-evolving situation because apparently they found an out clause in Russell's contract. Ironic, since that's what happened to Perez at Aston Martin. But Toto Wolff said, George Russell is going to be on the grid next year. And if he's not,
how does he know that?
Well, funny how it works, because George Russell is not really a Williams driver. He's a Mercedes driver on loan to Williams.
Yeah.
And
the Chelsea FC loan program.
Now, the problem for him right now is that the discount on engines that Williams get for signing him is not as much as it's not as much money as Perez would bring to the team with his own personal sponsorship.
I don't want pit Perez fandom against Russell fandom. Man, they should both be in F1 together. We need more teams, goddammit, but it's not how this works.
That's what it boils down to, is F1 doesn't have enough seats for as much talent as is there.
Yeah, look, and it was worth pointing out as well that Toto said, look, we're not going to be sneaky about it. We'll still happily supply Williams with power units, even if Russell is not there. It's a separate
Even
deal.
though that's their biggest bargaining chip to keep Russell there.
Yeah,
right,
the thing, it would be...
We're kind of powering the car.
It would be bad publicity if if Mercedes just like, well, if you get rid of our driver, we're taking the engine supply contract you signed with us for the next 5 years.
But that's the thing. George Russell isn't worth that money. Let's be honest.
No, he's not. One, he's not worth that money. And two, Toto said we're honouring that contract. We're not going to break it off or anything like that. He's already said that publicly on the record. Look, I get it. George Russell is an incredibly exciting talent, and we all know how potentially good he could be. We all want him to be in a better machine, so we know exactly just how good he is. He probably is really good. But unfortunately, in the context of where Williams are at as a team, Russell is not what they need. They need
it's the wrong place, the wrong time, and Williams is not what Russell needs either.
Yeah,
because Russell needs something better for his talents to show.
I think
Williams needs money to infuse.
I think worst case scenario, he takes a gap year in 21, comes back with a better team in 22.
That's the problem is thinking. Who?
Yeah,
try Formula E for a year.
Because there's two options for him. Mercedes seat number 1, Mercedes seat number 2.
Not happening.
Because Racing Point, as much
Aston
as
Martin.
in other news, Aston Martin and Mercedes.
We now know what the AMG stands for. It stands for Aston Martin Gaydon.
Yeah, they have their drivers because they're never getting rid of Lance Stroll so long as Lawrence owns that team, and Vettel is there for the long term, not only as a driver but a brand ambassador.
Right. There's no
and,
real.
What it boils down to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dre.
I was saying there's no real easy point of entry for Russell to get back in, and that's the whole point. Unless he walks away from Mercedes altogether as a supplier and he goes it alone, which again might be risky in its own right in terms of what the resources Mercedes can give him. I know Toto's made the claim that
it doesn't get him way back in F1.
No, well, what do you reckon, King?
Well, the sign that he might have a way back in is the fact that Valtteri Bottas, when he re-signed for next year, signed a 1-year deal.
He's been on rolling 1-year contracts.
No.
He's on the Kimi Räikkönen plan.
When he first 1 year last year.
Nope. The contract before then was a 3-year deal. His first contract at Mercedes was a 3-year deal.
He's right, because I remember writing about this. He's been on rolling 1-year deals for a couple years now.
No, he hasn't. I have the press release.
No, it was 2000s. It was 17, 18, 19, and then he signed a 1 year for this year, and then a 1 year for next year.
Okay. I got the years one out. Basically,
we were all wrong. It's okay.
Yes, apart from King. No, what I was going to say is that look. Going by Toto Wolff's word is a dangerous game because Toto has let people down before when he's made similar claims. Like I friend of the show, Pat, who you may know as a guest here before, Patrick Hofstadter, who said, quote, Toto's like the worst sugar daddy imaginable, and I literally nicknamed him and called him a Splendor Daddy because he's like it's just
a sweet and low daddy.
He's just
a stevia daddy.
He's not because he shopped Esteban Ocon out to people a year ago, and no one would take the budge on this. He's done this with Pascal Wehrlein, and he made assurances that Pascal Wehrlein would be okay, and he didn't.
Every Mercedes Junior driver has ended up having to leave Mercedes' program eventually.
It doesn't work. They're too good to have a functional academy and not have ties to anyone else in the grid they can loan people out to, like Ferrari potentially does, and obviously Red Bull does have in its own right. So it's
Mercedes
messy.
Had a chance to have a B team, and then Manor died.
But the thing is, from a factory team perspective, the main reason you have a B team is for development purposes. For car development purposes. They clearly don't need that.
They have the best team in the sport. They have the best car we've ever seen.
Yes and no. And as well, if Russell can't get a seat in F1, Mercedes has plenty of exterior programs, a whole lot of GT3 cars that would be happy to have him.
Yeah, and that would basically be giving up on a guy who is one of the handful of rookie Formula 2 champions that we have.
But I mean...
Because the same thing happened with Stoffel Van Dorn. Because that's not
as a Stoffel Van Dorn fan,
And the thing is...
I know this pain.
Mercedes has done this before, where, hey, we're going to keep someone in the academy but take them out of F1, and Pascal Wehrlein went back to DTM, and
it was a pathway to nowhere.
Yeah.
And then he left again. And now he's with my boys.
Yeah.
On the other side of Stuttgart.
It's a messy one, to say the least. Nah.
It's just another example of F1 is not necessarily a meritocracy, and there's not enough seats. That when money comes a-knocking, sometimes talent pays the price.
Yeah. And...
No kidding.
Driver academies are not designed for the driver's best interest. They're designed for the academy's best interest.
Pretty much like a youth academy for some.
All that sweet, sweet brand equity.
Oh, yeah. Always helps. We want this guy, so the other guy can't use him.
Very quickly, King, we now have a driver salary cap?
Yes and no. So basically, reading through it, for a team starting in 2023, that's important, it's still a decent amount of time off, teams would now be limited to a maximum of spending $30 million in total on both their drivers. They are allowed to overspend over the cap, but it eats out of their normal cost cap for the rest of their spending.
Okay, so... And also, it's worth pointing out that if anybody is on an existing contract when it goes into 2023, that previous deal will be honoured. Employment law, basically. We can't just come into 2023 and suddenly tell Lewis Hamilton, oh, sorry, about that deal you signed a couple of years ago. There's a pay cut now, sorry.
Yeah, so expect a lot of long-term deals in 2022.
Exactly.
Yeah, you said this was the Ricardo rule.
As currently, the only driver whose contract wouldn't expire that is currently active would be Charles Leclerc's long-term deal with Ferrari.
Exactly. Yeah. Charles Leclerc, who signed the 5-year deal at the end of last season, his goes on to 2024. I think Max's might be right on the line. I think Max signed a 4-year deal last year. So, it basically... the only person this is not going to bother right now is Charles Leclerc, but obviously, as King pointed out, there'll be long-term deals put in place.
We're going to get these long-term deals in. We're going to backload these suckers.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're trying to circumvent an NHL salary cap.
I now christen this the Daniel Ricciardo rule.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for that.
That was King's copyright. King's going to sue you.
I don't see no copyright symbol on it.
No. Yes, I called it the Ricciardo rule because Renault literally unloaded the bank to sign Daniel Ricciardo, and Daniel Ricciardo ended up being the highest paid employee at Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. Every company in the alliance.
Well, are you sure? Are you sure that another employee might not be taking some extra money under the table?
He was legally the highest paid employee.
It always comes back to Carlos going to it.
There's an asterisk there somewhere. It's important. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm always the guy that says get these athletes paid as much as possible, so I'm a little bit gutted about that to a degree, but I can understand why it's in place. And look, for every team bar the big three, $30 million should be more than enough to cover both of their drivers in terms of their
especially
salary.
Factoring in the cost cap overall for their team.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the top of my mind, only 3 dudes themselves went to the salary cap, and it was Hamilton, Vettel, and Ricciardo, which kind of shows you why this rule became a thing.
Yeah.
Big names, big money.
Because if they had known that the driver salaries didn't come under the current cap, as King pointed out, their salaries would most likely skyrocket because they know they can just give their drivers whatever the hell they want, knowing they've probably saved costs elsewhere by having this cap in place. So yeah, probably for the best that that's in play on the grand scheme of things. And like I said, 30 mil should be more than enough for most of the teams in the paddock anyway, particularly Red Bull as well, because they have a tendency to underpay their factory dudes once they get into the sport. Hooray for academies. Anyway, finally, before we wrap this up as well, we're starting to get some rumored tidbits about the 2021 calendar.
We did kind of allude to it last week. We alluded to it last week that we're going to have a 23 race calendar. We're going to have a Saudi Grand Prix. We're going to have a Brazilian Grand Prix that's not in Interlagos, but at the Bolsonaro Drome. Whatever. Fine.
Yeah. What else is new?
I'm not thrilled with the changes, but money, the F1 is going to chase the money.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't thrilled about the changes, including Amnesty International.
Jesus Christ.
We race as one. Wait, how many human rights violations do you have?
So, well, if we went through every venue on the Formula One grid, we would be here a long time.
To be brief, Amnesty International warned Formula One not to let Saudi Arabia use their race as an attempt to sports watch their international image in front of a worldwide audience. And they have no problem with Formula One racing in Saudi Arabia. They just want it to be clear that labor standards are followed, that teams, drivers, and personnel are allowed to voice their opinions about Saudi Arabia freely. And
isn't this the country where if you talk about the problems of the country, you might get chopped up?
Yeah. And Amnesty International, Amnesty International noted that while Saudi Arabia has made a number of changes in recent years, activists are still being jailed, and maybe it'd be convenient if a driver or two said something about this during the race weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait for most of the grid to not do that.
Exactly. We all know that ain't happening. Sod that.
Yeah.
But that will just about do it for our Formula 1 episode. It's annoying that we wouldn't have a slightly better race to talk about and ended up being dominated by some idiot. But unfortunately, that's how these episodes run sometimes. Sorry about that. Hopefully, we'll be brighter in next week, because we have the Imola Grand Prix this weekend, the Emilia-Romagna GP, to borrow one from MotoGP. I've been learning. 2-day special, 2-day weekend, as you may or not know by now. Saturday practice, 90-minute session in the morning, straight into qualifying, and it's a 2-day weekend. That could be fun, right? Maybe.
It should hopefully help the logistics of for the teams.
Yeah.
Might be pushing it there. Might be pushing it there just a touch. As they would say in certain video games, Imola looking kind of sus. But in the meantime, places you could find us real quick one more time: youtube.com/motorsport101, facebook.com/motorsport101. Twitter handles on the screen, @motorsport_101 on Twitter, @motorsport101pod on Instagram, and patreon.com/motorsport101. I've been Dre Harrison, they've been RJ O'Connell, Cam Buckley, and Ryan Eric King. We'll be back very shortly, in times of real-time recording anyway, to talk about MotoGP and their second race at Aragon. And that was a fun one if your name is Frankie, because Frankie said relax again. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. Thanks very much for watching or listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Sayonara.
Later, y'all. Now I gotta go climb into a vent.
Bye.
You know, Imola be looking kind of sus, but Lewis's wing coat be looking kind of thick.
Oh.